Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tommy Lee, and we are going to continue doing what we do here, which is first reflecting, reading from the daily readings that the Catholic Church has given us. Today is the Tuesday of the third week of Advent, and then afterwards we're going to talk about things that are happening in current events, whatever's on my mind. So let's just get to it. If you haven't been here before, so what I typically do is we read the readings. I provide commentary or whatever sticks out to me, and then afterwards I'll try to put a little speech together, a little not really a homily. It's more just like a speech, drawing out certain themes, discussing how they can make us better human beings, how I struggle with certain things, and it's really all ad lib. It's not ad lib. It's just off the cuff, right? We're just brainstorming, workshopping, and having fun, trying to grow in holiness, try to put words to thoughts that are in our heads, and if we're not able to come to a conclusion on something, or if we're not able to make a definitive conclusion on an idea, or if I'm trying to be prudent in what I'm trying to say, we'll shelve the idea and continue moving. But yeah, after the readings, we'll talk about the news as well. So stick around. I hope you enjoy. And let's begin. Interesting thing before we begin. Sorry. Interesting thing about these readings is that there are very specific readings from the date December 17th to December 24th. It's like the church is gearing up for Christmas, right? So a lot of these readings are king-oriented, very much Jesus-oriented, very much Christmas-oriented, right? So the first reading is from the book of Genesis. Jacob called his sons and said to them, "Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. You, Judah, shall your brothers praise, your hand on the neck of your enemies. The sons of your father shall bow down to you, Judah like a lion's whelp. You have grown up on my prey, my son. Grown up on prey, my son. He crouches like a lion recumbent, the king of beasts. Who would dare rouse him? The scepter shall never depart from Judah, or the mace between his legs, while tribute is brought to him, and he receives the people's homage." I really like this passage. I think I had to really, I enjoyed the Judah like the lion's whelp, right? Associating Judah with being a lion, and then the lion being associated with being a king. I wonder if this is where we get this imagery of the king, or the lion being the king of beasts. Obviously, when I say kingly lion, you think of you might think of Lionheart, Richard Lionheart. You might think of Aslan from Chronicles of Narnia, right? Very beautiful imagery. A lot of kingly language, right? The scepter, right? Which is a staff of a monarch. And then, just to give context to the story, this is Israel blessing all of his sons in the book of Genesis, and then Judah getting probably one of the best blessings out there. Okay. Continuing on to Psalm 72, or the responsorial psalm for today. Justice shall flourish in his time, and fullness of peace forever. O God, with your judgment endow the king, and with your justice the king's son. He shall govern your people with justice, and your afflicted ones with judgment. Justice shall flourish in his time, and fullness of peace forever. The mountains shall yield peace for the people, and the hills justice. He shall defend the afflicted among the people, save the children of the poor. Justice shall flourish in his time, and fullness of peace forever. Justice shall flower in his day, and profound peace till the moon be no more. May he rule from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Justice shall flourish in his time, and the fullness of peace forever. May his name be blessed forever. As long as the sun, his name shall remain. In him shall all the tribes of the earth be blessed. All the nations shall proclaim his happiness. Justice shall flourish in his time, and fullness of peace forever. Continuing on. Alleluia, alleluia. O wisdom of our God Most High, guiding creation with power and love, come to teach us the path of knowledge. Alleluia, alleluia. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham became the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah became the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab became the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz became the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed became the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David the king. David became the father of Solomon, whose mother had been the wife of Uriah. Solomon became the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asaph, Asaph became the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, Joram became the father of Uzziah, Uzziah became the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah became the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Amos, Amos the father of Josiah, Josiah became the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the Babylonian exile. After the Babylonian exile, Jeconiah became the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, Abiud became the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, Azor the father of Zadok, Zadok became the father of Akim, Akim the father of Eliud, Eliud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar became the father of Mathan, Mathan the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Of her was born Jesus, who is called the Christ. Thus the total number of generations from Abraham to David is 14 generations. From David to the Babylonian exile, 14 generations. From the Babylonian exile to Christ, 14 generations. The word of the Lord. Again, very, when reading Matthew, especially for people coming to Scripture for the first time, like myself, 4 or 5 years ago, reading the book of Matthew, that's like your start. That's your beginning, right? So when you get there, it's very dry. You're like, what the heck is going on? But as I've grown in love of Scripture, understanding the history in Scripture, understanding God's plan for us, I love that lineage, right? Because you see very important key figures from the Old Testament there, right? Obviously, you got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Beautiful story. You got Judah, right? Judah, and they mentioned when it comes to Judah became the father of Perez and Zerah. Judah, their mother was Tamar, and you hear the story of Tamar in Genesis, the tragic story of Tamar. Just for those who don't know, Tamar was Judah's daughter-in-law, and Judah refused to. Tamar was married to one of his sons, and unfortunately, Tamar's husband passed away. And in that culture at that time, it was the father's responsibility to give one of his sons to Tamar. Right? Judah refused, and then Tamar, who was without children, tricked Judah into sleeping with her, and she had 2 sons, Perez and Zerah. Okay, so you continue that story, Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, right? Then you get Nahshon, Salmon. Salmon was father of Boaz, and Boaz's mother was Rahab. Now we also know the story of Rahab. Rahab was the harlot who helped the Israelites when during the I believe it was Jericho. It was during the time when the Israelites were crossing the Jordan River and coming to the Holy Land, and this particular city was being resistant to the Israelites, and Rahab was the woman who hid the spies of Israel, and then also assisted during. Well, actually, she helped in that specific way. So Rahab is mentioned in here, right? And then you see Ruth, right? We know the story of Ruth. She has a verse in our Old Testament. And then you have Jesse, David, Solomon. You have the mention of Bathsheba. She's kind of mentioned in here, not really, right? Because of the sin that she made, or because of her sin with David, she is only mentioned as the wife of Uriah, just as a reminder to everyone that David was a sinful person, right? And then you go through the list of kings, right? And they're all mentioned in the book of Kings and Chronicles. And these guys are they were very flawed people, very flawed people. All leading to the exile and then coming back from this hidden line almost to Jesus, right? Or actually to very specifically Joseph. Joseph the worker, Saint Joseph, my patron saint. Why is it relevant that this is Saint Joseph's bloodline, right? Because Saint Joseph was the father of the household and was the legal bloodline was his, right? Now we can talk about Luke and how there's a bloodline that directs, that basically goes down to Mary, but I think this is called the Joseph bloodline, right? So this is, and then Christ obviously being the only son of Joseph, this is why it's also important, right? Christ is the only son of Joseph, inherits the kingly position that Joseph had, right? Because Joseph adopts, right, legally Christ as his son. Okay. Although, and then, and for those who don't know, right, we believe that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, and that our Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph, her guardian husband, they never had conjugal relations, and that she was at least a perpetual virgin. There's debate out there about whether or not Joseph was, and the church actually has never officially commented on it either way through their teaching. Some people preach on him being celibate, just like Mary was. Others believe that Joseph had a family before Mary and Jesus. You can believe either way if you want to be a Orthodox believing Christian. I kind of lean towards the idea that Joseph was a virgin as well. I see it as fitting. I see it as fitting as this younger man who has these desires, choosing to set them aside for the greater good, right? But again, it's up to you to decide. It's open for you to choose which one you believe in. Okay, so going back to the themes that are in these readings, obviously there's this huge theme of kingship, right? Especially when it comes to kingship, bloodlines are very important. Bloodlines are very, very important. Who's your father? Now, I noticed this in growing up in Hmong culture. I'm Hmong ethnically. Who our parents were and who we were related to was very important. My relatives didn't really, my friends who grew up in Wisconsin didn't really seem to have that same experience as I did. It wasn't until I came to the South where that was more prevalent. Very specifically, South Louisiana, people ask who your kin are, who your people are, right? Where are you from? Who's your dad? Who's your mom? All these things, right? Very similar in Hmong culture. We go, who's your grandpa? Who's your dad? Who's your uncle? What clan are you from? Is there any connection between us, right? And I think that's pretty common in like close knit communities. It's very beautiful, and you can kind of see it prevalent in this, right? Now, Scripture scholars say that Saint Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew for a Jewish audience, right? And because he did so, he wrote the genealogy of Jesus Christ very specifically, right? Jesus being the son of David, the son of Abraham, making a connection there, and that connects to the first reading where Israel blesses Judah in a specific way, right? basically saying the scepter or the kingship shall never depart from Judah. There will never, Judah will always be king, right? The tribe of Judah will always be king. Something to think about when people start attacking Jewish people. We have to keep that in mind. And there are a lot of rebuttals, and we can kind of get into like that type of conversation. It's not. This isn't the right video for it, but I do want to bring that up, as a data point to keep in your mind, right? Very beautiful readings. Again, themes about God's kingship. So let's talk about that, especially as Americans. I think we kind of see monarchies and kingships and kingdoms with a little bit of skepticism, right? Like we threw off those English kings. We threw off that European ideology. We don't do well with despots. We don't do well with authority figures at all, right? We're very independent people, So I think I want to talk about that, right? Like the struggle with authority figures, and if it's a good or a bad thing. I do think I can be a bit contrarian myself. I'm very, very much a freedom lover, I would consider myself like center right, politically, right? A little bit more right leaning, in certain respects. And in a lot of respects, like very like libertarian, right? And yeah, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. I think I want to use that for the homily, right? So how do I struggle with this? Obviously, I struggle with, and let's relate it really to like the kingship of God, and the kingdom that He sets up on this earth. So what would be really good is if we talk about the authority structure that Christ has given us, right? Because He has established a visible kingdom on earth. We believe that as Catholics, right? And what does that look like? Who is that, right? We have Christ. We have the apostles, and the successor of the apostles are the bishops that they believe behind, right? And these bishops, right? They have their own successor, and to this day, right? That's what we call apostolic succession, right? So like my bishop here in Lafayette, Louisiana diocese, he was ordained by another bishop. That bishop was ordained by another bishop. That bishop was ordained by another bishop ad nauseum, all the way back to one of the apostles, most likely St. Peter, right? Because I'm of the Latin rite of the Catholic Church. Now, the Chaldean rite, the Byzantine rite, they might have a different succession line, but it should trace back to the apostles. Okay. So we're going to talk about the kingship of Christ, and I think when it comes to kingdom, when it comes to a particular virtue, I think what virtue I want to talk about is humility, or maybe even obedience, like filial piety. I like that. I like filial piety as a virtue. It is a beautiful virtue. I think we owe each other filial piety, right? Brotherly love, brotherly respect, brotherly faith, right? So let's say, what's an example of filial piety? Let's say I have a friend. My friend and I were texting back and forth, and then he says something that can be perceived as pretty rude, right? But because he's my friend, I give him or her the benefit of a doubt, right? My wife and I were having a bad day. I snap at her, or she snaps at me, right? She says something very short. It's because she's stressed out about something, right? I don't snap back, right? Because I love my wife, because I appreciate her, I don't respond with like my base reaction. I go like, no, there's a reason why she is responding in this way. Let me meet her where she's at, right? Kind of a lay explanation of filial piety, okay? Or faith, just like brotherly faith, a more, I think, apropos or appropriate example is how we treat the Pope. Let's just be frank, right? How do we treat the Pope? when the Pope says something, do we assume that he is seeking to harm the church, or are we giving him the benefit of a doubt because he is the Pope, because he is the shepherd of the Catholic Church here on earth, right? And we'll go more into that a little bit as I read the homily, right, or as I go into the homily, because I have this fresh video in my mind of an example of how to do this, right? What are ways we can do this to stay faithful to the church and its teachings. So, okay, yeah. And then, one scripture verse that really popped out to me when I was thinking about what does God have to say about filial piety as a virtue. Luke 10:16. Whoever listens to you listens to me, right? Whoever hears you hears me. Whoever rejects you rejects me and he who sent me, right? I think one of the early church fathers says this. I can't recall who. I think it's either Saint Ignatius of Antioch. I believe it's Saint Ignatius of Antioch. He says that when it comes to filial piety, or just obedience to your bishop, right? Obedience to your bishop is such an important virtue to have, right? Now we might go like, Christ came and set us free from the old law, like come from like a libertarian, like a liberty stance when it comes to worship and freedom. And I would ask you to consider if in the heavenly kingdom God set things up as a democracy, right? And typically when it comes to how God does things, God works pretty consistently. He doesn't like change his ideas. He doesn't like he is God. He is love. He is goodness, right? And he has a particular way. I'm trying to think of in like archetypes, right? There's a reason why humans we don't work well when there's like a triumvirate, right? Rome has tried this. The Roman Empire has tried using triumvirates to run their empire. It doesn't work. There's always one key figurehead at the top. It doesn't matter if it's a presidency. It doesn't matter if it's a presidency. If it's a dictator. If it's a king. If it's a pharaoh. If it's a Caesar. If it's a Kaiser. Right? There always is a singular person at the top making decisions of some level. Now we could argue and kind of go into the weeds of that. We're just going to leave that aside. But it's just something to think about, right? Like what does the kingdom of heaven look like, and how does the kingdom of heaven show itself in our human nature and how people organize naturally, right? Obviously, there's reasons why we set up the governmental system the way we did in America. I love it, by the way. I do love our nation, and I am a proud American. Okay. That being said, moving on. So we're gonna shoot for this homily. I'm gonna take a couple minutes to think on how I want to form this, and then we're gonna preach. We're gonna talk, and we'll see if it's good, and go from there. Okay. Always take a moment to pray, breathe, organize your thoughts, and then you'll know when I send it. All right. All right. Jesus Christ is the King of our hearts. king of the world, king of the universe, right? King of all nations is one of our titles for him. Right? Scripture says, the scepter shall never depart from him. He receives the people's homage, the people's honor. You know, that's one thing about kings. As an American, we have this idea of kings being unfair bullies who take everything, right? We don't have a very good image of what kings are like. We have the closest thing we have to a king, in quotes, is the idea of a president, right? Let's just talk about the presidency for a little bit, right? It seems like whenever every 4 years, every 8 years, there is a divide in our country about who should lead us, right? And we fear that the person that we don't agree with as a candidate will become an evil tyrant that will take away our rights, right? I wonder how much, I wonder if we, I mean, I sometimes I do. I think about this, you know, do I see Jesus in this way? Do I see Jesus as an evil tyrant? Do I see Jesus as my Lord, right? You know, I don't know. I don't think I do. I think he is. I think he is good. You know, I think he has tried. He has done good. He has done good. And it's interesting. Like, as he is the king of the universe, he establishes the political order in a particular way. He even established a church in a particular way, right? And like, although we might not struggle with Jesus being the king of our hearts, I think we struggle with the order that he set up here on earth, right? I think we struggle with, you know, our bishops, right? When we don't agree with their teaching, we struggle with, you know, our cardinals, our popes, right? Because we go, even though our presidents, right, our secular leaders are not as great as we want them to be or expect them to be. We understand that humans are flawed, but, you know, when it comes to our priests, bishops, and the Pope, we go like, you guys are supposed to be the holy men. You guys are supposed to be the guys who represent Christ on earth, and yet you're failing us, right? And in a way, when we attack and we think that about and it's fair to think that when somebody isn't doing well, because they're only human, right? But there is a line when we disrespect the kingdom that Christ established, right? Let's say, for example, calumny against Bishop Barron. You know, that happens all the time. People are very quick to critique the bishop, this great bishop, this good bishop who has helped so many people come to Christ and know Christ more deeply. They're very quick to attack him when he speaks in error, right? And when you're reading you just go to any video of his and read his comment section. Go to his Twitter and read the reactions to his posts, right? You can't even tell if the person who is writing the comment is a faithful Catholic or a Protestant or an atheist, right? It's the vitriol is so pungent. It's so acidic. It's so venomous, right? You know, so what does God have to say about this, right? I think Saint Ignatius said once in the past, one must have obedience towards your bishop, right? And he uses Luke 10, as a Bible verse. He who hears you, this is Jesus speaking to the apostles, by the way, and the 72. The 72 he sent on mission to preach his word. Whoever, which, by the way, they all received mission directly from Jesus. Right? I want to make that point very abundantly clear. They received ordinary mission from Jesus himself. Whenever a priest preaches, whenever a bishop is a bishop, whenever the pope is a pope, they receive mission through the laying on of hands to do their work. They receive a direct mission. There are times when people do receive extraordinary forms of mission to preach and to spread the word of God, but oftentimes that comes through workings of miracles, right? Okay, moving on. So from the Gospel of Luke, whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me, and whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me. Right? Jesus is talking about the line of witness, right? Whoever rejects you bishops, you priests, you who I have given mission, rejects me. Whoever hears you hears my words, right? And then whoever rejects me rejects you, rejects me. Whoever rejects me rejects he who sent me. Who is that? God, right? You reject the will of God the Father, okay? And that's why that verse is why it's very important to be cautious about disobedience and be cautious about when one has a difficulty with the church. Be cautious about that. Be weary when one has a difficulty within oneself with the church. Be very weary, because that could be, because righteous anger is true. It's valid. It exists, but oftentimes our hearts are unable to discern whether or not this is righteous anger or disobedience. If it's from the enemy, from the evil one, right? And unfortunately, I've seen plenty of people walk away from the church because of that, right? Because they believe what they believe is true, right? They believe that they are more correct and they are more right and righteous than the church that Christ established, right? Okay. So, how do we do better in the face of our modern times, right? In the face of this flood of information that we receive from the Pope, from our bishops, from our priests, how can we do better? I think part of the reason, honestly, this is a side note, I also think part of the reason why a lot of laymen struggle with what the Pope is saying is because we struggle with it because we're not reading the documents itself, and we have received a really poor education. Now, am I calling you stupid? No, I'm not calling you stupid. I'm just a product of that. I'm the product of a federal school system that did not teach me how to think or read correctly, right? And I'm not trying to shoot myself in the foot, right? Because I've done a lot of work trying to remedy that, right? It's very remedial studying, right? And it's important. I would actually call you, if you haven't done your own self-study, if you haven't done your own classical education, self-education, I would recommend you do that, right? Because it will inform your Catholicism. It will help you grow as a man, right? You might see it as useless. It's not. And don't just watch YouTube videos. YouTube videos are great. They're a valuable resource, and it's awesome that you get to watch people speak for free. But read books. Read the source material, read primary materials. You literally can have a conversation with someone who has passed away through a book. Thomas Jefferson, for example, right? You literally can go watch a saint preach, or read a saint's words on paper. These brilliant people, brilliant minds, and it really will help shape and inform your opinion on things, right? But what can we do like today? Okay, what can we do today about this process? And I love how this his name is Curtis Wagner, and his channel is like the Militant Thomist. It was Militant Thomist, and then he changed it to Scholastic Answers. But he had a great video about this. I'll try to link the clip, at least a clip I saw of it. I'll link it in the comments, in the not in the comment section, but in the details in the description, because it was very beautiful how he laid it out. Right? He said there are a couple when we find ourselves having difficulties with something that the church teaches or a church document, there are steps in which we should go about. There is a way we should go about addressing those difficulties. Right. So he says, first, read the document. Don't just listen to what other people are saying, right? Don't just, fake news comes out, right? I always think there is like there's a double standard there, right? News comes out by CNN about Donald Trump, and people go, that's fake news. News comes out about Pope Francis and what Pope Francis does by CNN, and people eat it up. They're just like, they're all for it, you know? There is a bit of a double standard there to the point where I want to make a meme about it. We'll see if I do or not, okay? But first, read documents charitably, right? After you read the document charitably, meaning, right, you're coming to it with an open heart, understanding that the Pope is trying to, or the bishop is trying to, they're introducing this idea to you for the sake of the goodness of your soul and the souls of all of those entrusted in their care. Okay? Struggle with it. If you have a difficulty with the document, struggle with it. You're supposed to struggle with it. You want to sit with it. You want to think what part of the document do you struggle with? And you want to try to reconcile that with the faith. Okay? 99 times out of 100, if you're a layman, there is a way to reconcile the problems. If you read the document, if you have a robust understanding, like if you read the document and you really start to find the other puzzle pieces to make the pieces fit, you can do it, right? You might feel like I'm trying to gaslight you or make you feel stupid, and I'm not. Like, I have no ill will in this, right? I also don't like, as a preface, I don't like the term gaslight, because I think the term gaslight is not precise enough. It's come to mean when somebody gives me cognitive dissonance or challenges what I think about the world, right? That person is gaslighting me. And then they attribute a negative motive to it when they don't know the individual's motive, right? Like, so it's a very, it's a loaded term that I think doesn't communicate ideas efficiently enough, right? If the dude simply, for example, if you just disagree with me, and I might just disagree with you, that's fine. And now we can talk about it, right? I think we should first presuppose that the person who's sharing ideas with you doesn't have ill will towards you, right? You know, that's just me though. But anyways, once you're struggling with the difficulty, you try to remove the difficulty. And if you can't remove the difficulty, if you've done your reading, you know, you've tried all the resources that you have, you use all, like, for a layman, using Catholic Answers, using somebody who's trying to interpret it really well, and then, you know, trying to see which sources, learn from them, which sources do they pull from to come to the conclusion that they have come to, and then you read those sources too for yourself, right? Don't just rely on these great thinkers. I mean, I'll call them great, But like, don't just rely on other thinkers to think for you. Read it yourself, come to a conclusion. And if you're still struggling, talk to your pastor about it. Right? Go to your priest. Go to a priest you know. Go to your bishop. Really have a conversation with them. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this document. Can you please help me understand how it reconciles with my faith? And I'll tell you what, here's another thing. You might not get a satisfactory answer from the first priest that you sit down with, right? Because these guys are very busy, right? That's not to discourage you, but that's just to inform you ahead of time before you sit down. Then you go, if that doesn't work, you go to the next priest, right? There should be plenty of priests around that you can have conversations with. And then if that doesn't work, you go to your bishop, right? You go straight to the man himself, and you try to figure that out, right? I've never hit that point, right? Because I've been able to reconcile most of the difficulties that have come up recently in regards to Pope Francis and his pontificate and what he teaches, right? And for the percentage that I haven't haven't researched, in quotes, right? I just I don't have a problem with the document, right? Like I also don't believe in. I'll be honest. When the news comes out, I tend not to care, right? I tend not to care what people are upset about, right? And maybe that's naivete, maybe that's foolishness, right? But look, there are a lot of souls out there that need saving, and I'm not. And I believe that the Pope is trying his best to do good in this world, right? Because ultimately, it comes down to this: if the Pope is false, if the papacy is not true, I would say that would destroy most of all of Christianity's claims. You know, I might be like a theist, right? But if the papacy proves as not true, and that the vicar of Christ is not actually the vicar of Christ, that would pretty much invalidate all of Christianity in my eyes, right? So, something to think about, right? One might think that's kind of I'm putting too much on the papacy, and I'm open to debate. I might be wrong, right? Like, you can feel free to share more ideas with me, change my mind, whatever. If you know me personally, we can have a conversation about it and sit down over some bourbon or, some cigars to talk about it. Anyways, so, yeah. So what would happen if we all treated each other this way, right? So let me give you like a very personal example of us doing this. And I love that the Catholic Christian brought it up, and that if your dad, he brought up this point too, but I've always thought it, and I feel bad that I'm kind of sad that he beat me to the punch, right? But let's say you have a father, right? Let's think of a person, an adult figure that you have a great relationship with. If he did something kind of silly or said something kind of silly, you wouldn't go straight to your Facebook or your Twitter to complain about it, right? You would first go, hey, what happened there? You would call him, talk to him, right? I love my dad. My dad is great. He has made many mistakes in his life. But if I heard or found out that my dad did something silly, right, made a mistake, because he's a fallen human being just like me, I wouldn't go on here on YouTube to complain about it. I just wouldn't. I love him. He's my father, right? And it's like, well, and where are you at with that? Where would we all be at if we all treated Pope Francis, our bishop, our priest, like we treated like a loved one? I think we would be in a better place as a church, right? And we wouldn't be scandalizing so many Christians, so many non-believers, right? So that's that. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk about the news. Let's talk about something else. There was a shooting in my hometown, Madison, Wisconsin. I'm born in Madison, Wisconsin. I live now in Lafayette, Louisiana. I love Madison, right? Something about that place, it's like, it's nostalgic. There's an element of nostalgia. It's also where I was baptized, right? The Catholic Church is a little waning. It's waning a little bit there. The population's getting older. I'm always praying for them. I'm always praying for that area and for that city. It's built between these two lakes, right? So you got I think it's Lake Mendota or Lake Monona, right? Interchangeably, Lake Mendota or Monona, and Madison's on an isthmus, right? Like between the two lakes. So like you have the two lakes here, you have an isthmus here, and the Capitol building sits at the highest point on a hill, right? And it oversees the city. And I think there's a city ordinance that says no building can be built higher than the Capitol building. Yeah. So like when you're driving up East Washington, you can see the Capitol building. That's like 20 blocks away. You can see, right? See it. It's very beautiful. So all that being said, there was a shooting at a Christian K-12 school. 3 people died, 1 student, 1 teacher, and the shooter. The shooter was a 15-year-old girl, and there were 12 people injured outside of that, right? All in various conditions, injured, critical condition. And it was on my mind. Don't really have anything else to comment. I don't want to touch base on motives, right, at all. If you want to find it, you can go find it. But I think I want to bring it up, and I want to offer it up as prayer. Going back to the bit about classical education, right? Here's a book that I really appreciated and enjoyed. It's called The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Weiss Bauer. She teaches, I think she teaches classical education at William & Mary, and on the East Coast, and she homeschooled her kids, but she really provided a good set of tools in which she provided me a good set of tools for which I could use to approach my classical learning. She draws a lot from Thomas Jefferson when it comes to encouraging you to read for yourself. Right? Thomas Jefferson actually says, instead of pursuing an education through some kind of or a deeper education into things through a college, right? One should pursue learning on their own, right? Daily, right? It should be part of the routine, and I love that. Another thing that she advocates for is keeping a common book, right? A common journal. And what is that for? That's for you to write down your notes and your thoughts about what you read. I mentioned this a couple episodes ago, but I'm going to mention it again because I believe in it. It's truly important. When you write your ideas down, they become real. They become real. You're able to understand and articulate what you're talking about, what's up here, right? That's the basis of a liberal arts education. You're supposed to be liberated to share your ideas because without it, you would be held back. It's almost like your soul would be in chains, right? So there's almost this discipline one must practice or participate in so that they could share who they are, right? Who they are, who they truly are, who God is calling them to be, right? So get a common journal, right? You get a list of classical books, like all those books. Like I know you, and you are there are books that you have on your list in your brain that you go, I should read that. I should read that, right? And you should read it, but you haven't. Why? Because something's holding you back. Something's holding you back, right? And whatever that is, get it out, remove it, right? I think so. I'm reading, for example, I always thought, and this is why a classical education or educating yourself is important, right? I always thought growing up, like Don Quixote, you know the story of Don Quixote, right? He's the man who fights against windmills. And when people use the term Don Quixote, I always thought in context that Don Quixote, or this Don Quixote type character, was the guy who was like this gallant knight who was outside of time. He was like this magnanimous knight that was holding on to virtues of times past, right? And people thought him as old-fashioned. It would be like John Wayne, or let's say even Captain America. It's like Captain America in the Civil War movie, right? He's a man out of time with old school fashions, and people just don't. He's just not with the times anymore, and he's just holding on to a time gone past. That's what I really thought about Don Quixote, right? But when you read the book, you realize that Don Quixote is not really that, right? Although it is, my statement before is kind of true, it more is about the foolishness, this character's foolishness, right? It's a satire, it's a comedy, it's a not very serious book. It's a comedy of errors, right? It's like watching Seinfeld, but it's like Seinfeld in book form, right? It's this dude who's just being silly, who actually how it goes is this dude read so many books about knights, right? In an age where there were no knights, he read so many books about knights that he became a knight. He chose to become a knight, and he goes around these normal people acting like a knight. He attacks a windmill because he believes they're cyclopses. He attacks a herd of sheep, thinking that they're the enemy. They're an enemy. They're enemy cavalry coming to fight him. They're an enemy army, right? This dude is insane. He's crazy, right? So when people call you or me or somebody that you love a Don Quixote, they're actually insulting them, right? They might not mean or think that they're insulting them, but they are insulting them, right? They're saying that you're crazy, you're insane, you have no grasp on reality, right? Don Quixote almost like even lies to himself to keep his fantasy going, right? He justifies, he finds ways to justify his paradigm of thinking, right? Now, that being said, there are moments of virtue and light that come through because of the virtues that Don Quixote has, right? And those moments are very beautiful, very beautiful. I think about this story with there's a woman who consecrated her, or she basically chose to be a virgin because she was so beautiful, and people kept throwing themselves at their feet. So Don Quixote appears at this funeral procession where a guy killed himself because he got rejected by her again, and he blames her for his suicide. Now, everybody starts to get up in arms. All the men who were there, who were chasing after this girl, they almost start this witch hunt after this beautiful woman, right? And then the beautiful woman shows up and says, hey, look, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. You guys are crazy. I decided to be a hermit and only share my beauty with the trees, the rivers, the birds, right? And I made that decision. If I was ugly, you wouldn't be giving me this attention, right? But because I'm pretty, You guys are. If you guys are ugly, right, and you guys, and I should treat you guys the same way, almost in a sense, like, you know, um, and just leave me be. I just want peace. I want to be alone, right? And the speech and how it was written was very beautiful, and the writer Cervantes is great, right? Because it made you admire the woman more, right? All the characters, all the men admired the women more, right? So Don Quixote is there witnessing this all. What does he do, right? He stops all the men from chasing after her. Very virtuous, very good, right? And then there's always a flaw, there's always a catch. He runs into the woods to chase after her, which is hilarious. So, anyways, a reason why you should read classical education yourself, right? It's just, that's an anecdotal experience, right? That's an anecdotal evidence for you to do it yourself, right? Because you never know. Don't particularly trust what other people think, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't good teachers out there. There are great teachers out there, right? But even they make mistakes, right? They're human. They're just like us, you know. I think Scripture says, learn to love wisdom as you would love your wife, right? Keep wisdom close to you, right? He who finds wisdom and treasures her has found the greatest treasure. Wisdom has that, it has that theme in Scripture, right? So do that, seriously. Our world needs it, your family needs it, our nation needs it, your state, local government needs it. So pick up this book, Well-Educated Mind, read it. It will teach you, as you do it over here, it will teach you how to read. It will teach you how to think, right? And then, but ask questions. Don't forget to write things down. When you find a great teacher, stick to them. I can recommend a couple good teachers. I love Warren Smith from the Scholar Society. He has a great way of thinking. He's on YouTube. Dr. Jordan Peterson, and all the people he runs with, right? So his little circle, Brett, Eric Weinstein. You can go with Jonathan Pajot. He's a great teacher. John Vervanke, great teacher. I'm sure there are plenty others. Bishop Barron is a great teacher, right? Plenty of great teachers out there, right? You just gotta find them. You gotta find them and you stick to them. And you learn from them and help them inform. Or actually, just what you should do also is when they teach, you learn how they think. Learn how they think and copy that, right? Really find these people, these men that you are drawn to, right? I'm speaking as a man to other men. I'm sure there are plenty of women out there. And I apologize. Just none come to mind at the moment, right? Anyways, I've been speaking for a while now, so I think we're going to end it there. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed this towards the end. Trying to do a lot more in this space, right? I'm trying to grow in virtue. I'm trying to grow in speaking more precisely, in speaking without a script, in sharing my ideas with the world, trying to become more eloquent, trying to become more educated. This really helps. This format really helps me to publish things, keep my word, and stay disciplined throughout my day. So I appreciate you who view these videos. My next goal is to create better thumbnails, right? So better thumbnails, and I want to learn how to edit my videos. I really want to learn how to clip them up, because an hour-long video is a very long time for people. Like, I understand that, and against better advice, practically everyone who I sought counsel from told me to be very precise and brief when it comes to my videos. And I went against better judgment because I went against that advice because it was stopping me from creating, right, and publishing videos. And then I encountered another person I really respect. His name is Ruslan KD, so shout out to Ruslan. He mentioned something about shooting live, going live, shooting what he shoots, having a topic, talking about that topic, and then publishing it, and then going back in and clipping it. And I like that. That's just my style. That's more my style, because I can really get into the weeds in my own ideas, on my own ideas, right? So, and I don't like that. I don't want that. I need to keep moving forward. So, anyways, God bless. You guys are great. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging in there with me. If you have any suggestions, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, do all those thingies, do all those YouTube things. You know, if you disagreed with my opinions, please be nice. And I'll catch you in the on the next video. God bless.